This is so, and my congratulations for picking such a extremely interesting topic, and especially for a business school. Many great thinkers in business schools, my good friend C.K. Prahalat, for instance, have been thinking about this. He was the inventor of the phrase of the bottom of the pyramid. So there is a lot which business schools can add when they discuss this topic. I want to make 4 comments in the context of what Jeffrey Sachs has said. The first one is the devastating effects of agricultural policies of the US and Europe on poverty. We should not forget there are about 1 billion people who have $1 a day to spend or less. And there are about 1 billion people who are underfed. Probably they are the same group, most likely. But to remind this audience what the agricultural subsidies do, both in Europe and the US, and Japan I may add, it chokes off agricultural development in developing countries. So it means that a whole sector which could be flowering in the developing world is being choked off because we block off the access of their products to our markets. So for instance, for decades we have been paying in Europe 3 to 4 times the price of the world market price of sugar, because sugar producing nations who do it far more efficiently and effectively and are often much poorer in their economic development than we are, cannot access our markets. And by the way, who pays for it? You and me, because we pay 3 to 4 times as much for sugar than we could have been doing. Now, there is a bit of reform there, but we're still paying way above the market. Second thing we do, when there is agriculture there, sometimes we kill it off through our subsidies, because we export to these markets. Jeffrey Sachs gave the example of cotton, which is a very good example. Now, a new cynical chapter has been added in the history and the story of agricultural policies, and that is biofuels. Now, what we are doing nowadays is, while we know that there are 1 billion people poor and hungry, we put food in our petrol tanks, in our cars, in order to move around. Now, this is one of the most important factors why we are seeing food prices worldwide rising at the moment. There are other factors as well, but this is a very important one. Because with subsidies, both in Europe and in the US, we are now encouraging farmers to grow corn and then change it into biofuels. And we say, of course, this is good for the environment. Well, that is a myth. A recent study published by the Swiss government shows that these first generation biofuels do not have a positive effect on global warming. They do not have a positive effect. So this is a myth. Now, food prices are going up 20 to 30% at the moment over the last couple of years. A World Bank study has shown that a 1% increase in food price leads to a 0.5% reduction of calorie intake. So while you know there are 1 billion people hungry, we still support these policies. So, to use an old Indian language, we speak with 2 tongues. On the one hand, we commit ourselves to the plight of the poor, but on the other hand, we enact new policies which are directly adversarial to the plight of these people. The second point I want to make is on the whole issue of development aid. Now, I completely agree with Jeffrey Sachs that we have to step up our game here in the Western world. However, there is a big however. This in itself is not enough. Many countries have received billions and billions of dollars over the last 25 years, many times the size of their GDP, and have nothing to show for it. So there is an issue here. Throwing money at the problem is not the only answer. Yes, we need the funds, but we need to improve the absorption capacity of these countries to take on the aid. And the second problem we have with development aid at the moment is that 55% of all development aid never reaches its destination. Somewhere before that, it gets stuck in consultants, bureaucracy, government bodies. 55%, World Bank estimation, never gets there. So I think there is the efficiency and effectiveness of development aid is something which really needs to be considered, and I think business schools can play an important role there. The third point I want to make is the role of business in poverty alleviation. Now, the best thing business can do for a country which is poor is being there and doing business. That's the best it can do. Oxfam, together with Unilever, studied the effects of Unilever being in Indonesia. I know that country very well. I've lived there 7 years. And they started this study, and Oxfam hoped it could confirm its suspicions that most of the value added was for the multinational and not for the local receiving community. I had lived there for 7 years. I knew that the conclusion was going to be completely different, and it was. 3/4 of the added value which Unilever generates in Indonesia stays in the country. How? By paying taxes, by paying people decent wages, by organizing training, not only for our own people, but also for our suppliers or for our customers. Our distribution base. We supply jobs, over 10,000 people, only in our distribution base. And we train these people, etc., etc., etc. So if you go through this with a fine fork, you'll find the vast majority of the added value stays in Indonesia. And again, business schools can enact studies to study these value chains and to document the positive effect of multinationals on these countries. So the best way business can do is by being there. However, you need an environment as well in order to do business. So what should the host governments do? Well, there I very much agree with Jeffrey Sachs. It's back to basics. We need roads to transport our products. We need infrastructure. We do need people with a decent education. And we need people to be healthy, otherwise they can't work. So healthcare is very important. So it's these basics which a country needs. Sometimes it's as basic as safety and sanitation. We used to have a great business in Congo. Unfortunately, we had to leave because we could not guarantee the safety of our own people, of our own employees anymore. And that's when it all stops. So, again, we need, of course, basic infrastructure to do business. But if you can see in how many countries, not only Unilever, but other companies as well, can operate, over 125, you don't need much, but you do need some things, yes? And most important of all, one of the really important things is reliable judicial systems. The final point, isn't there anything business could do more? Of course there is. Of course there is. And here I'd like to come back on the point Jeffrey Sachs made. In the pursuit of earning a decent return for our owners, our shareholders, we develop skills and competencies or technologies. And very often, if you apply these skills with relatively little effort in the communities with which you are surrounded, you can make dramatic changes. Now, let me give you 2 examples. Both of them have been documented by business schools. I think IMD wrote a study on the Marine Stewardship Council, a case history. And I know Harvard has written a case history on Sakti. And let me focus on that project for a minute. Sakti is a project in India. We have a great company in India. So Sakti is a program which employs rural women in rural communities, deep rural India. And they help us in our distribution chain. Now, if you live in the bottom of the pyramid, and when you're very poor, you can't step into your car and drive 20 kilometers to go to the supermarket to buy your shampoo or your laundry powder. You haven't got the money for it. So what we do in India and in Indonesia and in Brazil is we practically deliver the products on their doorsteps of the consumers. Because these people can't travel more than half a mile. So we need to have our distribution points very, very finely in the rural areas of India. So what we did is we selected women in rural areas, we trained them, and then through a microcredit bank, we asked them to invest $200 to buy our Unilever products. And they then set forth and started selling these, their stock of products, with a markup of course, to little shops in the area and to consumers, door to door. We've tested this in two states in India, and currently we do not employ them. They are entrepreneurs, but we guide them and we train them. We made sure they had their microfinance, and we currently employ 20,000 women there. And on average, they can improve their monthly wage of about $20 to around $40 to $50 on average. That is the difference of life and death in these communities. Because $50 a month is a hell of a lot of money for that community. So what we have done there is de facto, we've made this effort an integral part of our business model. We know everything about distribution. We know everything about training people. That's part of the skills we have by doing business. So by applying that with relatively little effort, in these two states, we're already helping 20,000 women. If we do this across India, we could easily talk about 200,000 women. So I've been to these villages, I've seen it. I've seen what happens to the lady. All of a sudden, she becomes more assertive. She becomes a better mother, a better manager of her household. It has a radiating effect. Anyway, the point I want to leave you with for the business school is these things become more effective if business can find ways in which it can build these sort of efforts into its business model. Thank you very much.